First of all, I appreciate anyone who watches this video. I know it's super long. However, this is my reaction to a ton of different things on the truck after like almost 30 hours of driving this truck and driving almost 3,000 miles on this particular truck. And then I've also driven newer Rams and F-150s, which I talk about in the video. And this is more of a comparison with those three. But yeah, just a couple things. One is, I know this video is super long, so if you're watching it, if you're thinking about buying this truck, please watch the entirety of this video, because there's a lot of things that, yeah, the first drive you take this truck for, you might find it pleasant, but there's a ton of little things that after you put a couple hours, after you drive it in the rain, after you drive it at night, after you work on something under the hood, or you use these different features and buttons, you just begin to notice a lot of things. So I'm going to try and real quick do a couple very short clips of numerous little things that add up as an intro after this. And then I will go into the entirety of the video, which is very long, and I'm just kind of speaking my mind about it. But yeah, if you're seriously considering buying a truck like this, or wondering which is better between the newer F-150s and the Rams, then please watch this. I didn't make this video as a rant so that people wouldn't buy it. I just want to give people user information about many of the things that I just, every single time I was driving the truck, just weren't great. And you know, not all newer trucks are the best, but so anyway, bear with me. Thanks for watching this video, and hope it's useful to the viewer. First of all, this place right here where you're always putting your elbow on, it's not very comfortable. It's stiff, it's not very cushy. Every single decent bump on this truck, it takes a while for that frequency to flatten out. One thing I do like, which almost all new trucks have, is this, you know, you don't have to take off a nozzle for it. You've got this step, really cool feature about the Ram or the Silverados. But again, this button is like, I go up to grab the tailgate because I'm gonna have my hand like this whenever it drops, and it's got this tiny little button here. So I gotta press this, hold it for a second, and then drop the tailgate. I hate this about this truck. This space up here, I can't see anything in there, and I can't reach it. I have to like lean way over, and there's not a whole lot of room. And if I forget something, like I could easily forget my keys and never see it. We are going through Colorado right now, and I'm gonna look in the mirror here. So I open it up and can't see my face. Raise it up, I have to lean over. There I am. Little things like that. Now it's facing me. Now it's not. How does somebody miss this? Like, just put this an inch up. That's it. This may seem like you'll have to drive this truck in person, but like that small little thing, every single time I use it, I'm having to, I like reach down looking up at the road, and I'm like trying to like figure out where to twist. And it takes me a while to find it. And on like the Rams and the F-150s, it's, I would never own a base model because I cannot get over how uncomfortable and brick and stiff these seats are. They're actually terrible. Whenever you pop the hood in this truck, you can barely do anything in the engine bay because it is so high. It's the small things, like the truck on the back, on, you know, this is volume adjustments on, it feels like I'm driving a lifted truck. If you're trying to load a dirt bike or a motorcycle in the back, the two-sectioned bed, or I'm sorry, the two-section tailgate where it drops down, and then there's a second piece that drops down with a step, that makes a huge difference when loading a dirt bike. It was so nice. I would consider getting this truck if I took out dirt bikes all the time for that reason alone. Full center console, it's like further up and back, and it's not very user friendly. Oh, this is a quick truck, but it shifts all the time, and it's like shift, 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 shift. So it's been a couple hours of driving this truck, and I'm like listening to music and some other things, and I swear every 5 minutes I'm like, man, it's not really pleasant to drive this truck. And then I think about, like, why do I feel that? And I think it's just every so often, like, I'll go over a bump and it's like all spongy and Cadillac and rolls a bunch. And it's like, oh, that wasn't very pleasant. And then I'll look over the hood and it's like, wow, that thing is massive. It doesn't feel like I have good visibility. That's not very pleasant. And oh, I go and change one of the controls and it's like, oh, that's kind of hard to reach and far away. And it took me a second to find what I was looking for. And I'll set the cruise and have to double check, or it'll start raining and I'll try and turn on the wipers. It's like I can barely find this small little notch. And then I think about other trucks I've driven. It's like you don't have to think about it that much. It's just after a few minutes of getting used to all the layouts, it's just easy. It just makes sense. And a lot of things about this truck is just doesn't make sense. And it keeps reminding you that feels like there's a distinct lack in quality and user friendliness about it. Yeah. Guys, so this is my second rental of a GM brand new pickup. I had a rental about a month ago of a GM 2022 truck that I used to actually pick up the dirt bike in the bed of the truck right now. And now this is a rental 2022, or it might be a 2021 Silverado. This is not the base model. I think it's one tier above. The GMC I got was the base model. But boy, the point of this video is I have now driven a 2021 F-150, 2022 Ram 1500, and I've driven now a GMC and a Silverado, and actually like a 2021, I can't remember, it was like the all-terrain peak model of the GMC. And now that I have specifically this, I put about 7 hours of driving on the 2022 Ram 1500, and I put on about 10 hours on the GMC, and I'm going to be putting on about almost 30 hours of driving in this truck. But I was really excited to drive the GMC and this truck. And let me tell you, let me make this clear, I have I do not have any bias against GM, Ford, or Ram. I'll give my honest opinion. Now, I used to own a Ram 1500. It was a 2010. It was overall a really good truck. I think the 2010 Rams and up, specifically the 1500s, they made a lot of really solid trucks. I know the mid-2000s LS trucks, really solid. I know lots of the F-150s also had really solid engines, but man, after putting about 10 hours on this GMC, and this Silverado is almost identical to it, after, you know, I drove it, I messed with the steering wheel controls, I used the column shifter, I set up my heads-up display, the rear view mirror, the mirrors, you know, used the truck bed, sat in the back seat, used all of the features and the controls and the radio and the entertainment system and the you know, just getting in and out of the truck and the AC. This truck is awful. And I don't say that lightly. It's not like, granted, this is way better than my Ram 1500 just because it like gets better gas mileage and it has Apple Play and it has, you know, automatic AC. I would, by far, I would get like a 2006 Silverado over this truck and put in a backup camera any day over this truck. So first off, I want to start with suspension, and I don't know if it'll pick up on the GoPro, but the GoPro is just shaking on here. This truck rolls around, it rides like a Cadillac, and it bounces a lot. Now, if you don't believe me, go and drive an F-150, Ram 1500, and then a Silverado, a brand new one. I know in the past several years, I've seen this and felt this a lot over Silverados. They bounce up and down around, and yeah, they're cushy and comfortable, and they're not bad, but hands down, F-150 and Ram 1500 suspension is better. It sucks up the bump, and then it doesn't bounce around. Every single decent bump on this truck, it takes a while for that frequency to flatten out. And on this road, I'm having a constant kind of shake. This is a very smooth, clean road. This truck is just kind of shaking a good amount. For example, check out this check out the column shifter, how it's just kind of jumping around. Now, part of that is just kind of, this thing is loose, but part of that is, man, this truck is just kind of jittering a little bit. It's not bad, like long trips, it's not terrible, but even now, like going down the road, it's not perfect. Now, granted, maybe there's a wheel imbalance somewhere, so I'm gonna attest to that. Maybe, you know, these are very new tires. Generally, they keep up on rentals with that sort of stuff, but the GMC that I drove before had the same sort of feel. It just was not on par with suspension. And it wasn't like, yeah, it's slightly not as good. No, this is hands down, what the hell, GM? Like, this thing bounces around, it rolls like a Cadillac. Whenever you go over a speed bump, it bounces around several times. Anyway, next thing, the column shifter. I'm kind of, you know, there's three, I think, main shifters these days. There's a column shifter, there's a center console shifter, and then there's the knob that Ram uses. I personally, when the Ram started using the knob, the thought of it, I was thoroughly against. And then the first time I drove it, it's great. It's simple, it's effective, you can reach down, it's a large knob, you can feel when it clicks, it doesn't click past drive, it works, it's out of the way, it doesn't take up any room. I actually love that knob. I love it. I would prefer that than anything else. And I was thoroughly against it when it first came out. I'm like, no, I'd much rather a column shifter or a center console. Now, with that being said, I still like the center console shifter on some of the higher model GMCs and the like the Ram TRX. I know the upper model F-150s. I like them. I mean, it works, it feels good, it's solid, you know, because you don't have the seat that can raise up in the middle. I like, you know, the center console shifters, but in particular, this GMC, or sorry, this Silverado and the GMC I drove, the center shifter sucks. It's just as bad as the mid-2000s ones that sometimes got a little, and F-150 had these issues too, and probably Dodge around that time, but it's kind of loose. It doesn't click into place very good. It's not notchy. This thing, it's just not very good. This is a brand new truck. Like, this truck had 200,000 miles, it'd be one thing, but this guy, man, I just have not been impressed. And I far prefer the Ram 1500s or the F-150s with the console or the steering shifter. Much better. It's much more notchy. You can feel when it goes into drive. Just have not been impressed. The small thing I do like about it is it has a triangular shape that feels good in your hand. That's about all I can say about this truck. All right, next, steering wheel controls. My 2010 Ram 1500 had more user-friendly cruise control, audio adjustments, and everything. Now, granted, it didn't have like the phone, you know, it didn't have these two buttons, but the user friendliness of my Ram had like 4 main buttons, cruise control on the knob, just like Toyota's, that worked great, very simple, easy to use. And this truck, like it's the small things, like the truck on the back, on, you know, this is volume adjustments. On the other side, it's like the, you can change the song. The feel of these are very rectangular and they're kind of hard to feel. They have a little bump on them, but it's hard to feel. My Ram 1500 had more feel. The feel of it was just better, and you could put your fingers on the back without looking, and you could feel where the buttons were. And then just the whole, pressing this in, and then you would think there would be a button above here, but there's not. You're supposed to like switch this knob down. I mean, yeah, once you get used to it, but the practicality and the feel, I mean, I've driven this truck for about, you know, 15 hours, and it's annoying. It keeps being annoying. It's not like after a couple times you get used to it and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So it's not terrible, you know, it works great, but it's just not as good as Ram and not as good as Ford. I will say Ford, I haven't been super impressed with their steering wheel controls either. It's just too much going on the steering wheel. I think Ram on some of the base models, It's doing it better. Even the cruise control on the Rams, the newer ones, I'm not a big fan of. It's just the practicality of the ones that Toyota uses, where it's this little knob that comes out here, far more of a fan of. Yeah, I mean, everything works. It's just every single time I use it, I'm like, oh, that's just kind of pesky and annoying, and they don't have good, like, whenever, if it's pitch black outside and I just put my finger on here, it's kind of hard. It's like you have this center one and then you kind of forget, okay, which one is which, and same on here. It's just, there's too much going on. There's not clear indentions. It's just not terrible. It's just not the best. The door, getting in and out. First of all, this place right here where you're always putting your elbow on, it's not very comfortable. It's stiff. It's not very cushy. I want to say the Ram 1500 and the F-150 are a little bit more comfortable on that. This place, that's a terrible spot. Like, when are you ever, like, it's smooth to the surface, it's hard to find, it's not in a good spot. Terrible place to put that, shitty design. This thing works. I love the F-150 where it's, you grab this handle and you press it right there. I love that so much. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but every single time you open this door, where does your hand go? Your hand goes like this, and then it grabs this. F-150 superior. That little handle makes it so much easier. It's just extremely logical. It's simple. It works. I know the Rams have a similar thing to this, but I know on theirs it's a little bit lower. This plate right here, I don't like how the F-150s, it's so wide and it swoops down. Not a big fan of that. But on here, there's not really a good place to put your elbow. Another big one is when I'm standing here or sitting in the seat, if I reach over, I can't reach any of the damn controls. Like, full stretch, I can't, like, I can barely reach this, but I have to, like, lean forward. It's just, I don't know what about this whole center console. It's like further up and back, and it's not very user friendly. Here's a gripe about both the Ram 1500 and the newer Silverados, but the engine is tucked up way further back, which is much better on, like, the weight distribution of the truck and center of gravity. I get that, but when you're trying to replace your rear spark plugs, compare, like, if you ever look under the hood of the older, like, 2012 to 14 Rams compared to the 2021s, the engine is just tucked way further back. Same on the Silverados. It's just hard to get to, hard to work on. I don't like that. That's a downfall of all of these newer trucks. Vehicles, the 10 speeds, especially on the Mustangs, are nasty, nasty. I really like them on the Mustangs. However, on these trucks, they're smooth. You don't really think about it, but in particular, hands down, the Ram, I prefer the 8-speed. For the sole reason of this thing shifts all the time. It shifts so much, and you feel it, and it's, again, it's not bad. It shifts smooth, it's quick. You know, this is a quick truck, but it shifts all the time, and it's like shift, 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 shift. And I really think the 8-speed on the Rams, they really got it down. And I know the F-150 also uses the 10-speed. It's really smooth. If anything, I think the shifting points on this truck are crisper than the F-150. So I think as far as crispness and speed, the Silverado, at least in these years, is better than the F-150 and the Ram. But as far as a normal truck I would drive every day, hands down, I would take the Ram. The shifting, the downshifting when you're using this guy, it's pretty quick and snappy. Feels good. No complaints about it. All right, couple things I actually kind of like about this truck, and there's not much. Two things. One big thing, if you're trying to load a dirt bike or a motorcycle in the back, the two-section tailgate, where it drops down and then there's a second piece that drops down with a step, that makes a huge difference when loading a dirt bike. It was so nice. I would consider getting this truck if I took out dirt bikes all the time for that reason alone. I love that feature about this truck. Another thing I really like about this truck are the mirrors. They're simple, they're rectangular, they look good. They have a wide, good view of the road. They're in a good spot as far as height goes. They're just simple. They work. They're just great mirrors. The Ram 1500 mirrors are great too. I think they're a little bit taller, so you have a little bit more visibility. But I mean, I like these mirrors. These are great mirrors. The like 2015 to 17, 18 mirrors on the F-150s, it's like a very wide and awkwardly, they suck. I know the 2022 F-150 mirrors are more rectangular like these, which is much better, but the mirrors on this truck are great. They work great. One thing I really don't like about this truck is it's high. It's super high off the ground. It feels like I'm driving a lifted truck. It's just, and it rolled, this paired with these bouncy Cadillac suspension, I really don't feel super comfortable going around corners. The Ram 1500 and the F-150 feel just a little bit lower to the ground, even the four-wheel drives, and they feel better. Suspension and just the whole thing feels lifted up and bigger, and I don't like that about this truck. Another thing I don't like is, honestly, I am not a huge fan of the body paneling on this truck. I really love how the Rams and the F-150s, their body panels just aren't huge. I hate how on the F-250s and the newer 2500s on the Silverados, the bodies are just massive. They're huge. The panels are just huge. The same on this truck. If you compare the doors and the panels of this truck, they're huge. I mean, compared to like a 1995 Silverado, it looks like it's double the size of it. Not only that, this can be a good thing depending on what you're loading, but the bed on this, the sidewalls of the bed are higher on this GMC and the Silverados, which take more effort to get in and out of, and thus far I prefer them to be a little bit lower. The F-150 and the Ram 1500s, it feels like they're like an inch or two lower, and it feels better that way. Small thing that's good about this truck is it has a lot of hooks in the bed to where you can anchor stuff. I think that's in the 2022s. I want to say the 2020s and the 2021s don't have as many anchoring points in the bed. What else? One pesky thing I keep for the past 15 hours, every time it rains, it sucks. This little thing. First of all, this tiny little button is just super obscure. Like on all of the other trucks, it's like you press in right here, or generally there's like a very obvious button that's similar to other models and makes. This is so like, you have to reach down, feel for this button, and it's small, and then you press this, and it's kind of like getting your hand in here to press this is just, it's obscure, it's not really logical. But even worse than that is every single time I go to turn on the mirrors, I'm sorry, the wipers, it's, the only place is right here in this little section, and believe it or not, this may seem like, you'll have to drive this truck in person, but like, that small little thing, every single time I use it, I'm having to, I like reach down looking up at the road, and I'm like trying to like figure out where to twist, and it takes me a while to find it. And on like the Rams and the F-150s, it's this whole end of this thing is the part you twist. So it's a small thing, but the more and more I used it, the more and more I was like, golly, it's so hard to find that little button, and it's just a pain in the ass. Like this whole portion right here, they should have made this whole thing the wiper and put this button right here, like so many other cars have had for decades. I mean, it's just not user-friendly. The lights over here, again, super hard to reach. I have to like lean way out, and I'm 5'10", I'm not like super short, super tall, but it's just kind of far off. They work good. Not a big fan of the electrical parking brake. A lot of the newer trucks have that. Again, this one is like you can't reach it. It's like down here. It's just little things. It's the little things that add up. The start stop button, it's like kind of small and kind of at a weird place. It's not super obvious. I know it has a light on it, but I want to say the F-150s and the Ram 1500s, theirs is bigger and it's like further up in a more accessible location. These buttons down here, I remember the first time I went to turn on the four-way flashers, it took me like 30 seconds to finally find it, you know? On like the 2014 Silverados, they had it right here, which is, it's right in front of you, and they had it for like a decade, like from the 1990s to 2016, 17, they had it right here. Everyone was expecting it. It's right in front of you. It's an easy on-off button. This one, I was like looking around all up here, looking around, didn't find it. Finally, it was like the center button right here is it. Again, this interface works, it's effective, but if I just reach down here, I can't navigate this without looking. I have to look at the buttons. It's not like, you know, the only thing I can do is like fan, this knob does this knob does this, and then the rest I'll have to take my eyes off the road to look at this stuff. I mean, a lot of the newer trucks have a lot more buttons and gizmos on them. F-150, I mean, the newer upper model of F-150s just have way too many buttons and, you know, controls, and they're all kind of guilty of this, so not really inherent to this truck, but yeah. Also, another thing, this space up here, I can't see anything in there and I can't reach it. I have to like lean way over, and there's not a whole lot of room, and if I forget something, like I could easily forget my keys and never see it. So I know on the F-150s, I want to say it like slopes down and it's just more visible. This thing is so high up, I can't even see what's up there. I don't like that. The vents on this thing work good. Not really any complaints about the AC or the vents. They blow great. The AC is cold. The stereo system on this truck is good. It's not great. It's not bad. It's not like a huge complaint. The Ram 1500 felt like just it had a more full audio, but again, this is the base model. I know I rode in a newer GMC with like a Bose or Sony, I can't remember which, and it sounded really good. The bass was great on all that. I think he had like subs underneath the seats though. Yeah, just like this whole interface is like so far away, and it's like up and in. It's not like close to you and super easily accessible. I have to kind of lean out to press buttons. A tiny small thing that they actually fixed from the 2021s to the 2022s that you don't notice it until you drive it is on the 2021s, or might have been the 2022 GMCs. I'm not sure if this is GMC, the Chevrolet, but there's this indentation on the hood right at the tip that looked cool, but every time after it rained and the hood was wet, it would keep spitting up water onto the windshield, and you'd have to keep turning on your windshield wipers, which is like the thing you would just never think about. That's small, but it was a pain in the ass. After every single time it rained, it would start spitting up, and for like 5-10 minutes you'd have to keep running the windshield wipers because it would keep spitting up on the windshield, which they fixed. But it's something tiny that I know a lot of trucks, you know, you don't know until you drive it or you drive it in the rain, that happens. The lights on this truck are good. The brights and everything, they're not great, but they're clean, they're crisp, they're good visibility. But again, with a higher lifted truck, which is what this truck feels like, going down the highway, a lot of people are flashing you. All right, one small thing that on the 2022 GMC had this, where you could go to your backup camera and turn it on, because right now I can't see out of my rearview mirror because I've got the bike in the bed. Well, you could just keep that camera on while you're driving down the road. Super useful. This truck, I hope they fix this. There might be a setting that you can change this, so I'll try and update this video if I find this, or correct me if I'm wrong, but whenever you're driving down the road, you turn on the backup camera, it automatically turns off in 8 seconds. That sucks. I can't see my trailer. I'm gonna say there's got to be a setting in here where you like turn on the towing system and it keeps it on. But whenever I'm not towing anything and I try and turn on the rear view camera, it automatically turns off. That's a pain in the ass. I'm like 80% sure there's got to be a setting I can find in here that prevents that from happening, but something small I wanted to point out. Something I hate about all of the newer GMCs and Chevrolets is the button to open the tailgate is like you got to reach up with your thumb or like press with your finger, hold it for a second, and then it clicks and it opens. Now again, I already covered how much I like the double phase tailgates on some of the newer Silverados and GMCs, but that button system is ass. It doesn't feel good when you press it. It's hard to press. It's a small button. Like on the Rams, it still has that little handle underneath, and then there's an electronic button. That sucks about them. The door handles on the outside when getting into the truck, they're very similar to the F-150s and the Ram 1500s. They work, they're good, not really any complaints, but yeah. Another gripe about this truck is whenever you pop the hood in this truck, you can barely do anything in the engine bay because it is so high. Everything in the engine bay is pretty difficult to get to. And hands down, the F-150 and the Ram 1500 are better about this. They're still not perfect, but this truck is so high in the front. And, you know, two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, regardless, it's hard to work under the hood. It's very raised up, and quite honestly, it sucks. It's, you know, both the Ram and the Silverado have their engines further back, and they're harder to work on, but this truck in particular, the sidewalls, again, with the bigger body panels, it sucks. It's like harder to get in and work on your truck with that. You have to get a step stool, even if you're like 6 foot tall. Gas mileage on this truck, it's all right. It's gotten slightly better each time. Not really anything to say there. The seats, how comfortable the seats are terrible on this truck. Now, the GMC I had a month ago did not have the adjustable seats, and it was awful, and it was blocky, and they were also cloth seats. But the Ram that I drove last, the F-150 that I drove last, and my older Ram 1500 all had significantly more comfortable seats. Just, they were more squishy, they held you better, they were more comfortable. These are very stiff seats. I spent like 5-10 minutes trying to adjust this, and this truck actually has the full adjustable seats. These seats feel like they're brick. They suck. They're not, like, if you just push on the seats, like, they're just a flat wall right here. It sucks. Man, these seats are not that comfortable. Now again, this is the base model, but I'm telling you, your base model seats should be very comfortable, and these are definitely not. Like, just for that alone, I would never own a base model because I cannot get over how uncomfortable and brick and stiff these seats are. They're actually terrible. Look how huge this panel is. It's massive. It's massive. Small complaint, but this it's not very strong in these areas, and it doesn't close really solid. And I can imagine long term this is going to break or not fully close and stick out partially. I know the F-150s and Ford had tons of issues with that. One thing I do like, which almost all new trucks have, is this, you know, you don't have to take off a nozzle for it. I do like that you've got this step, really cool feature about the Ram or the Silverados. But again, this button is like, I go up to grab the tailgate because I'm gonna have my hand like this whenever it drops, and it's got this tiny little button here. So I gotta press this, hold it for a second, and then drop the tailgate. I hate this about this truck, it sucks. This truck, again, is like super high, so I mean, that could be better for some people. You can get more in here, but honestly not a big fan of it myself. I do kind of like the shape of this stuff up here. That looks pretty cool. GoPro directly in front of my face, and I'm gonna look in the mirror here. So I open it up and can't see my face. Raise it up, I have to lean over. There I am. Little things like that. Like, what the fuck is this? Like, I have to literally pull it out, open it. Now it's facing me. Now it's not. Like, what is this? Like, this is like, how does somebody miss this? Like, just put this an inch up. That's it. All right, one feature I like about this truck is that you can press this and all 4 of the windows go all the way down if you keep pressing it. However, what I don't like is they only go down. So then if you want to go back up, you have to press all 4 of them. This should also have a reverse feature. If you press up, it raises the windows. So over on the glove box, in this upper glove box, on my 2009 and 10 Ram upper models, they had a system like this. However, all of this was lower, and it had, if not bigger, of an upper casing that you could get to. Not only that, the handle for this guy was on the further left side to where you could pretty easily, as a driver, reach over and grab it. This one is so far away, like I can't really use this that much. Now, maybe that's a good thing because there's more space in here, but my 2010 Ram 1500 thought about that, yet Chevrolet can't. Like, I can't really use the glove box. And granted, like, generally the driver is going to use what's in the glove box, not the passenger. And they should make it more accessible to the driver. All right, so overall, I don't mean to crap on this truck, but the practicality and the small little features and buttons and user friendliness of this truck are not really there. There's some aspects that are nice, but it's not all there. The seats in this car, I could never own how uncomfortable these seats are. And the body panels are massive. And the suspension, it's just awful. So those key things right there alone just makes this truck, how in the world is this a brand new truck, you know? Like, I'm not just making this up. Like, when I first drove this truck, I was like, oh man, it's kind of quick and it's nice, and wow, that's kind of pesky, and oh, that doesn't really make sense, and oh, it's kind of hard to get to that, and wow, this button isn't very useful, or I can't find this button, or every single time I go to use this thing, it's kind of a pesky pain in the ass, and oh, whenever I pop the hood, you can't reach anything underneath the hood, and it just adds up. And guys, the more and more I drive this truck, it doesn't get better. It's just like, yeah, thank God I don't own it. Like, straight up. I'm not like the Ram 1500 I drove. There were some little things about that one that were like, oh, this could be better. But every time I got in and drove it, it was just like, this is a solid truck. I don't have to think too much about anything. It drives good. It rides good. The visibility is there. It's not massive. It doesn't feel like you're on a 4-inch lift. It's just so many different things about the Ram. And a lot of the F-150s is better. Don't buy this truck. All right, another small thing is the steering wheel feel. The F-150 and Silverado for the past several years have had a very similar loose and smooth feel to the steering wheel, which it's easier kind of gently going around turns and everything. But I prefer the Ram 1500, which is a little more tight and sharp, for the simple reason of, on the highway, this thing kind of walks around a bit more if you're not careful because it's so loose. But on the Ram, it kind of stays pointed. Another thing I'm not a huge fan of is the Ram, since like 2009, has had just a smaller steering wheel and a little bit thicker, and it's just easier. It's not as big, it's more comfortable, because for whatever reason it's thicker and your fingers aren't as bending and it's as tight. Maybe this feels better in a smaller person's hand. I know this is like a really small gripe. It's not like it's bad. It's just like, I prefer the Ram 1500 over the F-150 and the Silverado. Now, I cannot go too much into reliability of these trucks. However, generally speaking, the Hemi engines from 2009 to current day from my experience, which don't, take this with a grain of salt, has overall been a solid engine, overall. The 2000s to, the LS 2000 engines on Chevrolet were really solid. Most of them were just really solid, dependable engines for 200, 300K easily. In my experience, I've spoken with a couple different people that worked at Chevrolet dealers, and I have a good friend of mine that has a 2014 GMC, and the direct injection, the valve train, and overall reliability of their engines has by far not been as good as they were. Now, I know a lot of companies like Ford and Ram have also trended towards, the EcoBoost and direct injection, everything they can do to get better gas mileage. I know from experience, the EcoBoost, I know several people that have 200K on their EcoBoost. The EcoBoosts are stupid fast. The smallest EcoBoost engine in the F-150s was way faster than my Ram 1500. It's crazy how much power those little engines have. And from my experience, my buddy has 200K on his EcoBoost, and he tows a crap ton with it, and all he does is oil changes. And I've heard a lot of people's with the 5.3s with the direct injection, they have valve train issues and, check engine light and misfires. And from my experience, the Silverados for the past decade just have not been on par with V8 reliability as compared to some of the other flagship F-150s and Ram engines. I know the V6 Pentastar engines on the Rams, from my experience, were not as reliable as the 5.7s, but I think sometimes you can really trace it down to people not changing the oil. But anyway, I really cannot supply hard evidence that these newer trucks are not reliable as far as their drivetrain and their engines. However, from my experience, Chevys and GMCs have had one too many issues under 200K, a valve train, or an injector goes out, or a valve spring breaks, or just stuff that should never happen before 400K on a daily driven truck like this. I had 250,000 miles on my 2010 Ram 1500. I religiously changed the oil, and I never had an engine issue, not one. Never had a lifter issue. I know some of the Rams, people complain. I want to say in the 2011s there was a spike in those, maybe due to poor manufacturing, but I had really good luck with my Hemi that I had. I know a buddy with an EcoBoost had really good luck with his truck. I know some of the first gen Coyotes on the trucks had some issues, which I think they've ruled out. A good friend of mine, his father is a mechanic, and he's working on these newer trucks a lot, and he said that the Rams and the Silverados in particular, more the GMCs and Silverados than the Rams, have had some very consistent issues where like valve spring breaks at 20K, just crazy stuff that should have never happened. Now, maybe that's 1 in 1,000. Again, can't supply hard evidence of that. Just from my experience, though, it's like I'd be more hesitant to buy these newer trucks knowing that I've had a lot of people have some bullshit issues with them. All right, directly behind me is a 2022 Silverado. Coming up right here is a brand new Ram. And in front of me is like a 2022, or actually that's an older model Ram. Still looks good though. Up in front of me is a 2022 F-150. Bodies and looks. The Rams for the past decade have had more of a bulbous look to them. I think they're really good looking trucks though. I love how the Ram did the dual exhaust on them. I love the mirrors on them. Everything about them from my ownership of my 2010 is they're practical. They're easy to wash. They don't have a bunch of weird concave body panels that are difficult to wash. I love how in the newer F-150s, their body panels are just smaller. They didn't make like this massive body on them like these newer Silverados. Here's an F-150 coming up on me. That one looks like it's a little bit lifted, maybe has a little bit bigger tires. But you know, it's conservative. It feels like they're not just making body panels 3 inches bigger for no apparent reason. You know, there's just more stuff you gotta wash, more area, surface area that can get hit or dinged up. All right, so this console up here and the gauges, they work. They're very similar to the 2014s and up Silverados. I don't mind them. I think it's effective. It's clean. It's, you know, everything you need to know. Definitely has a wider screen up there with your, you know, trip information than the base model Ram I had. Maybe because this is a higher model. But for whatever reason, from my experience, I have really preferred and liked the user interface and just the overall layout of the Rams and also the F-150's display. This works, it's good. I don't have any like direct complaints. I just know whenever I was driving the 2021 F-150 and the 2022 Ram 1500, the user interface and the heads-up display felt a little bit simpler, cleaner, and more effective. It's not bad on this truck. It's just like I overall prefer the other trucks. So it's been a couple hours of driving this truck, and I'm like listening to music and some other things, and I swear every 5 minutes I'm like, man, it's not really pleasant to drive this truck. And then I think about like, why do I feel that? And I think it's just every so often, like I'll go over a bump and it's like all spongy and Cadillac and rolls a bunch, and it's like, oh, that wasn't very pleasant. And then I'll look over the hood and it's like, wow, that thing is massive. It doesn't feel like I have good visibility. That's not very pleasant. And oh, I go and change one of the controls and it's like, oh, that's kind of hard to reach and far away, and it took me a second to find what I was looking for. And I'll set the cruise and have to double check, or it'll start raining and I'll try and turn on the wipers. It's like I can barely find this small little notch. And then I think about other trucks I've driven, it's like you don't have to think about it that much. It's just after a few minutes of getting used to all the layouts, it's just easy. It just makes sense. And a lot of things about this truck is just doesn't make sense. And it keeps reminding you that it feels like there's a distinct lack in quality and user friendliness about it. Yeah. We are going through Colorado right now. I'm with the mistress. So Carly, what are your thoughts on the truck?
Suspension's great.
She's lying.
The seats are even better. Super comfy.
I think I've gotten a little more used to the driver's seat.
The driver,
The passenger, I feel like there's not adjustments on that one, and for whatever reason I jump in that and it seems like it's set up decently, but they're still not very comfortable seats. But I think on the passenger seat you can lean it back and use a pillow and stuff, but still my back is not feeling too great. But it's beautiful out here. We're driving past this airport, or at least an airstrip, which is super neat. We're probably about to break down though. You can always tell by this sign. If this is in front of you, then probably gonna break down. This is the outro of the video. I didn't have a good end to this video. I'll try and maybe throw in a couple more pictures. I mean, I drove this truck from very southernmost tip of Texas all the way to Idaho. So almost 3,000 miles. And yeah, every time I got in that truck, again, when I first got in, I was like, oh, cool, newer truck. It's fast, it's quick, AC works great. And then every single time I drove it more and more and more and used it more, I was like, man, I wish I could have gotten a Ram rental truck or a Ford rental truck. I haven't personally driven like the brand new Ford F-150s. I know they look different. Interior, exterior is a little bit different, but hopefully I will soon. But anyway, really appreciate it. If you've made it to this point of watching this whole video, thank you. And, you know, tell me your experiences. If you've owned this truck or have a very different opinion, or like, hey, a couple of these things I agree with, but there's also some really awesome things about my truck, or hey, you can actually adjust that, and here's how. You know, this is just in 30 hours. I haven't read the entire owner's manual. I haven't owned this truck for a decade, right? So this is just a lot of first impressions and 3,000 miles and 20 to 30 hours of driving this, not years worth of ownership, right? But in the 30 hours and 3,000 miles of driving this truck, I'm so thankful I don't have it. And I, hands down, even though the gas mileage was nowhere near as good as this newer Silverado, I would have much preferred to have like a 2010 Ram 1500 or like a 2017 F-150 with a EcoBoost. You know, anyway, thanks for watching this video. A lot of times I go through and watch these later and I think about things, or I add them, or I add things to the video. Well, I can't add them into the video, but I add them into a comment below. So check out that as well. Thanks for watching.